What if I told you the most powerful thing you can say to a toxic person is nothing at all? They don't fear your rage, they feed on it, but your silence. That's the one thing they can't control, and it terrifies them. You don't have to fight, you don't have to scream. The real power lies in how quietly you walk away. They're not afraid of your anger. In fact, they need it. They thrive when you lose control, when your emotions overflow because it gives them the upper hand. Your pain doesn't bother them. They inflict it just to feel superior. But there's one thing they can't handle: your silence, your detachment, your refusal to play their game. Because the moment you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, justifying, or seeking their validation, you transform. You become something untouchable. A calm, grounded presence they can't predict or manipulate. This isn't about getting even. This is about reclaiming your peace without stooping to their level. It's about becoming so emotionally unshakable, so mentally clear, and so spiritually untouchable that your very absence becomes intimidating. What scares them isn't that you shouted, it's that you're done explaining. They no longer have access to your energy. No more attention, no more emotional fuel, just silence. And in this video, I'll break down exactly how to make toxic people uncomfortable without ever raising your voice. You'll learn how to walk away with quiet power, how to hold your ground with presence, not noise, and how to command respect without saying a single word. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Toxic people don't control you because they're loud or clever. They control you because you keep reacting. They insult you, you defend. They lie, you try to correct it. They disappear, you chase. And in each of those reactions, you're handing over your power, bit by bit. But no one tells you this. The moment you choose silence, their influence ends. Silence isn't weakness. It's your greatest strategy, because people who are addicted to chaos cannot stand what they cannot provoke. And intentional silence, it drives manipulative minds mad. They don't want truth, they want control. What fuels them is your emotional chaos, your tears, your anger, your confusion. That's how they rewrite your reality. That's how they bend your sense of self. But when you go quiet, not out of fear, but out of inner clarity, you cut the cord. You refuse to play the part. You stop being their mirror. And without that reflection, they begin to unravel. So what happens when you stop reacting? 1. They lose their script. Toxic people are performers, and you've been playing the role they cast you in: the apologizer, the fixer, the emotional reactor. But the moment you step off the stage, they panic. Because without your reactions, they have no identity. 2. They spiral into doubt. Your silence forces them to sit with their own inner noise. Why isn't it working anymore? Why aren't they upset? Have they figured me out? That creeping uncertainty, that's your power coming back to you. 3. You take back emotional control. Every word you don't say is a boundary. Every moment you choose not to react is a message. You no longer have access to me. That's not weakness. That's silent dominance. The Stoics knew this long ago. As Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. You don't win by matching their chaos. You win by refusing to dance in it. They couldn't handle your silence in the first place. But what truly terrifies them is realizing they no longer have access to the peace they once disrupted. In other words, the chaos they try to throw at you only works if you let it in. When you choose silence, not avoidance, but deliberate stillness, you become untouchable. You're not pretending nothing happened. You're simply refusing to let someone else control your state of mind. And that alone, it shakes them. Because they realize, I no longer have access to this person's peace. But be careful. This kind of silence requires discipline. This isn't the silence of fear or emotional shutdown. This is the silence of strength, the kind that knows when to speak and when to let stillness speak louder. It's not easy to remain calm when they lie about you. It's not easy to stay composed when they insult, provoke, or guilt trip you. But every time you stay centered, you reclaim the authority over your inner world. And that's the real shift. And over time, this shift grows deeper. They go from provoking you to being confused by you. And eventually, they begin to fear the emotional distance they can no longer cross. Not because you attacked them, but because you revoked their access. That's what silence really does. It starves their addiction to reaction. It exposes their desperation to regain control. It reveals who they are when they can't stir up chaos. And most importantly, it proves one thing. You no longer belong to their game. Because silence, when backed by clarity, is not absence. It's a presence so powerful it can't be felt. And to a toxic person, that is terrifying. You want to shift the power dynamic. Stop reacting. Stop explaining. Stop showing up to battles that only leave you drained. Because when your silence comes from true inner peace, not passive aggression, you're not avoiding the fight. You've already won. Toxic people don't panic when you argue. They don't collapse when you cry, explain, or even walk away. What truly scares them is the moment they realize you've found peace and they're no longer part of it. Here's the truth. They never wanted your love. They wanted your attention. They never respected your truth. They manipulated your reactions. They were never seeking harmony. They were addicted to emotional access to your heart, your time, your thoughts, your energy. So when you find real peace, the kind that doesn't require their apology, their validation, or even their presence, you've just destroyed the very thing they used to feed on. Toxic people are spiritual parasites. They don't want you healed. They want you hooked. On overthinking, hooked on defending yourself, hooked on waiting for closure that will never come. Why? Because your peace threatens their chaos. The calmer you become, the louder their inner demons scream. The more detached you grow, the more exposed they feel. Your silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a mirror they cannot hide from. And when you radiate peace in the presence of someone who lives off conflict, they begin to suffocate. Peace isn't passive, it's a warning. Your peace says, I see you. I'm no longer moved by you. I've outgrown the level where you had access to my nervous system. And to the emotionally immature, that's unbearable. They may mock your calm. They may accuse you of being cold. They may try to reignite the drama because chaos is all they understand. But don't fall for it. Their attempts to provoke you are not signs of power. They're desperate flares from a drowning ego and your inner peace. That's your firewall. That's your freedom. They thought your silence was a weakness until they realized it was your peace. And when they lost access to that peace, they lost their grip on you. Now here's the truth. This isn't about building walls around your heart. It's about building a sanctuary within a sacred space where no one enters unless they've earned the right. This is when things shift. You no longer respond to guilt trips. You no longer feel the need to over-explain your boundaries. You stop dimming your light just to make others more comfortable. Instead, you observe. You let people reveal who they truly aren't. Then you decide what kind of access they get. Think of it like this. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of clarity. You're no longer stuck in the emotional spin cycle, questioning yourself, asking, what did I do wrong this time? You're no longer editing your truth to tiptoe around someone else's mood swings. You're no longer handing out backstage passes to your soul, to people who only show up to vandalize. And when a toxic person senses that kind of clarity, they panic. Why? Because they're not used to being locked out. They're not used to being irrelevant. They're not used to you not needing them to feel whole. Want to make a toxic person deeply uncomfortable. Smile with no hidden agenda. Walk away without a word of explanation. Sleep peacefully without closure. Let them sit in the silence they once weaponized against you. Except now, that silence is deafening. Because your peace, when it's unshakable, speaks the loudest truth. I no longer need to suffer so. You can feel powerful, and that's what haunts them most. They can't shake you anymore. They can't use you. They can't live off the chaos you used to absorb. You've become immune, not because you became bitter, but because you finally became free. Here's what most people miss. Toxic people don't fear confrontation. They expect it. They prepare for it. They manipulate you into it. They want you angry. They want you loud and emotional. Because when you're loud, they get to play the victim. And when you're emotional, they twist your words, bend the truth, and make you look like the problem. But when your boundary is quiet, firm, and unapologetic, there's nothing left to twist. No fuel to fan the flames. No cracks to crawl through. Just one clear message. Access denied. You don't have to scream, no. You just have to mean it. You don't need to announce your boundary. You just have to live by it. Because true boundaries, they're not declarations. They're decisions. They're not about what you say. They're about what you tolerate, what you allow, what you do not negotiate. No matter how sweet the bait, toxic people test limits, not words. They don't care what you claim to stand for. They care what you let slide. You say, I don't tolerate disrespect, but the moment you let it go once, they take notes. You say, I'm done explaining myself. Then you send a 4-paragraph text trying to be understood. You say, I won't be manipulated again. But then you answer the 2 a.m. text just to be polite. Not your voice, your pattern. So here's what powerful, quiet boundaries look like. Not responding to emotional bait. Walking away when a line is crossed. No drama, no theatrics. Saying no once and letting your absence say the rest. Removing yourself from draining conversations without guilt. Changing the locks on your peace and giving out fewer keys. This isn't cruelty. This is clarity. And always remember this. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about controlling access to you. You can't stop a toxic person from being toxic, but you can stop giving them front row seats to your life. You can stop handing over your attention, your time, your mind, your energies, if it's free, because these things, they're your currencies. Those who drain your peace don't deserve unlimited access to you. A Stoic never begs for respect. They simply move toward where respect is already present. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors, never had to raise his voice to prove anything. He lived as a standard, a quiet example, and let others remove themselves from his life if they couldn't meet that standard. And you must do the same. Live your values with such clarity and consistency that those who don't respect them feel out of place in your presence and leave on their own. no yelling, no war. Just let the gravity of the difference pull you apart. Boundaries aren't just words. Boundaries are your truth, lived out in action. They say, I don't need you to understand. I need you to respect. If you can't meet me in peace, then you won't meet me at all. If your presence disrupts my mind, then your absence is what I will prioritize. You owe no one an explanation. You don't need to issue constant warnings. You only owe yourself consistency, because toxic people may challenge your words, but they fear your consistency. And once they realize your peace is no longer negotiable, they'll feel a chill down their spine at one sobering truth. I can't reach this person anymore. And that becomes the loudest message you'll ever send, without raising your voice. But be careful. Toxic people don't just manipulate with anger. They manipulate with innocent-sounding conversations. They say things like, "Why are you being so distant? I didn't mean it like that. Don't you trust me? You're overreacting again. Then tell me exactly what I did wrong." And because you're kind and compassionate, you take the bait. You pause, you think, you try to explain your emotions, your boundaries, your reasons. You open up, and just like that, you're caught back in their web. Here's the harsh truth. Every time you over-explain, you hand over your power. Because in the wrong context, explaining isn't communication, it's pleading for validation. You hope that if you explain it well enough, with enough logic and heart, they'll understand. They'll respect your boundaries, but they won't. They're not confused, they're pretending. They know exactly what they're doing. They just want to keep you trapped in their game. Toxic people don't listen to understand. They listen to weaponize your words. The more you speak, the more data they collect. Your weaknesses, your values, what makes you react, and one day, they use it all against you. You said you hate yelling, but you just raised your voice. I thought you believed in forgiveness. Why are you so cold now? You always talk about emotional intelligence. Look at how you're acting. Suddenly, it's no longer a conversation, you're on trial, and they're the self-appointed judge, and you feel exhausted. Not because you were wrong, but because you're trying to justify yourself to someone who never truly cared to understand you. So what should you do? Revoke their privilege of hearing your explanations, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. Your boundaries are not a suggestion. Your peace is not up for negotiation. Your presence needs no justification. Strong people don't explain, they act. Stoics don't sit around trying to convince others to respect them. They make decisions based on principle without needing permission. You don't need to explain why you left. Just leave. You don't need to justify your silence. Silence is your answer. You don't need to write a paragraph to defend what's right. Just live what's right, with clarity, consistency, and calm. That's what makes people fear you. Not because you're aggressive, but because they can't manipulate you anymore. And this isn't coldness. This is clarity. You're not avoiding conversation. You're avoiding toxic loops, disguised as conversation. You're not cutting people off. You're simply revoking access to a life they've proven unworthy of. Once you stop needing to explain yourself, to argue about right or wrong, you begin doing something far more important. You seal off the mental leaks that used to drain your energy. You're reclaiming all the energy you once wasted trying to be understood by people who never truly wanted to understand you in the first place. From now on, hold this inner posture. I've said what I needed to say. I won't repeat it, and I don't need your agreement for it to have value. No more extra explanations. No overanalysis. No long messages trying to clarify your stance. Just silent confidence and unshakable self-respect. Because the less you explain, the more powerful you become. And when toxic people can no longer lure you into emotional debates, they realize they've lost the one thing they feared most: control over your mind. There's something about a calm person that confuses toxic people. Not someone cold, not someone detached, but someone anchored, someone who doesn't flinch when provoked, someone who isn't easily swept into chaos, someone who can sit in the fire and not be burned. That person is you. When you master your emotions, you become dangerous in a way they can't handle. But mastering your emotions doesn't mean you no longer feel anything. It means you no longer hand the keys to your inner world to anyone else. You don't pretend you don't feel pain. You face it. You learn from it. But you don't let it control you. You don't explode. Don't chase. Don't perform for validation. You pause. You reflect. You respond with awareness, not impulse. That's the gap between those with power and those lost in chaos. Toxic people hate this because they depend on your reactions. They poke, they provoke, they push your emotions to the edge just to see you break down, scream, beg. Because every time you lose control, they collect proof that you're the unstable one. But when you don't react, when you stay calm, clear, and grounded, you break their entire game. You hold up a mirror, and they're forced to look at themselves. The one thing they fear most. They realize, I can't control this person anymore. Let's be honest, this isn't easy. Emotional mastery doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you don't let others own what you feel. You don't respond to texts out of guilt. You don't argue just to prove a point. You don't fall apart just because someone goes silent or walks away. You observe. You question the story in your head. You respond with clarity or walk away with peace. And the more you do this, the stronger you become. Emotional strength isn't always visible, but it's always felt. It's in the way you no longer rush to defend yourself, in the calmness of your eyes when they try to shame you, in the moment you pause, breathe deeply, and choose stillness over explosion. That is silence. That is stability. That is refined power. The Stoics knew this as the highest form of inner discipline. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Understand this, and you will find strength." This isn't just philosophy, it's spiritual armor. When you master your mind, you can stand firm through manipulation, betrayal, insults, and chaos, and still not lose yourself. You're not numb, you're anchored, and when the storm comes, as it always does, you don't react, you respond. And sometimes, that response is just silence. And walking away, one to truly confuse a toxic person. Don't yell, don't chase, don't argue, just don't move. They insult you, you stay calm. They play the victim, you remain grounded. They push you, you don't push back, you step aside, and they'll feel it. They'll feel the emotional wall they can no longer climb. They'll sense the spiritual altitude you've reached, where their old tricks no longer work. They start to panic, because toxic people always need someone to blame, to manipulate, to mold into whatever shape serves them. And you used to be that person, but now you're not there anymore. You're no longer within their reach. You've withdrawn silently, steadily, and beyond their touch. That emotional freedom is exactly what makes you dangerous to them. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Your emotional freedom is sacred, and it begins the moment you stop clinging to people who only survive through the chaos they create in your mind. Detachment isn't bitterness. Detachment is clarity. It's when you refuse to measure your worth by how others fail to value you. And once you reach that level of clarity, you don't need to hurt anyone. You just walk away, silently, without explanation, without argument. You let them feel it. Let them wonder where your energy went. Let them chase a version of you they will never get back. Let them sit with the silence they once used as a weapon against you, now turned back onto themselves. Sometimes, the most brutal ending isn't a goodbye or a fight. It's a clean, quiet, unapologetic absence. You don't need to drag anyone through the mud. You don't need to expose them or scream your truth. Want to truly scare a toxic person? Outgrow them. Because what wounds them the most isn't your anger, it's your silence. It's the fact that you're no longer the person they used. To know they thought you would always be weak, reactive, dependent on their approval. But now you're calm, you're composed, you're clear, you're glowing without needing anyone's permission. They no longer recognize you. And that's not their loss, it's your evolution. Toxic people don't just want to hurt you. They want to keep you small, predictable, and controllable. They want you orbiting around them like a planet stuck in the gravity of a fake sun. But once you break free from that orbit, once your inner world expands beyond their petty games, they begin to feel the sting. Not from anything you said, but from the person you've become. And that's the truth they can't handle. Now. You no longer reply to messages, not out of anger, but because your life is too full. You don't explain, not out of arrogance, but because your energy has become more selective. You walk into rooms with silent confidence, not to be seen, but because you've seen yourself. You've built healthy habits, peaceful relationships, a disciplined mind, and most importantly, a self-image that no longer depends on external validation. You're no longer playing roles, no longer begging, no longer carrying people who refuse to grow. Now you're rising while they remain stuck halfway, and that's what shatters them. They realize, while they wasted time trying to control others, you were using your time to build yourself. You're not plotting revenge, you're cultivating inner power. You're not chasing attention, you're seeking peace. You're not looking for closure, you're rising. And now, you're no longer easily accessible, not because you're cruel, but because you're being called to something higher. And then, when you're no longer easily manipulated, when you choose peace over reaction, they become confused. They realize that what they once controlled is now beyond their reach. And that, right there, is the quiet but radiant victory. The Stoics have long understood this kind of power. They didn't need to shout at their enemies to prove their worth. They didn't need to win every argument. They won by becoming unshakable pillars, people who could not be moved. You don't need to be loud to make an impact. You just need to keep growing little by little, without asking for permission. Because in the end, they didn't lose you the moment they hurt you. They lost you the moment you started healing. When you turned pain into discipline. When you transformed anger into clarity. When you made your wounds into wisdom. They lost you when you no longer needed an apology to rise. And now, what haunts them isn't what you said. It's the image of you. The new you, strong, calm, and no longer within their control. That is the real victory. Not by proving them wrong, but by becoming someone who no longer needs to prove anything at all. One of the most dangerous tricks toxic people play is convincing you that to win, you must become like them, that you must manipulate like them. Strike back, argue, expose them, fight fire with fire, until you burn yourself in the process. But the truth, the moment you reflect their darkness, you lose twice. You lose to them, and you lose yourself. You don't rise by lowering yourself. You don't have to sacrifice your character to face chaos. And they'll try. They'll test every boundary you have. They'll provoke you, twist your words, betray your trust, and then play the victim. Why? Because they don't just want to win. They want to infect you. If they can't control you, they'll try to contaminate you. They want you to react in toxic ways, so they can say, "See, you're just as bad as me, but you are not like them." Choosing peace doesn't make you weak. It means you've risen above your instincts. Choosing restraint doesn't mean you don't feel anger. It means you respect yourself more than you do your rage. And choosing not to fight back with poison, that's not cowardice, that's strength. Reacting is easy. Getting angry is easy. Throwing pain back is easy. But to pause, take a breath, and walk away with your dignity, that takes a kind of discipline few people ever master. You can't fight darkness with darkness. You fight it with light. That light is your calm. That light is your clarity. That light is your refusal to enter mental battles dressed as emotional warfare. This doesn't mean you let them walk all over you. It means you choose your battlefield, where you have the advantage. Not in the mud where they crawl, but on higher ground, where boundaries are clear, where silence is sacred, and where your soul is not up for negotiation. Don't think of it this way. If you mirror their cruelty, you become just a reflection of them. But if you hold your peace, you become their contrast, and the part of their conscience they've been running from will start to awaken. They'll have to sit with your silence. They'll wrestle with your stillness. They'll see themselves in your calm, and they won't like what they see. Because what truly breaks a toxic person isn't confrontation. It's the painful realization that they threw everything at you, and you still didn't fall. That's the foundation of Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Read that again. Not silence, not success, not strength. Integrity, unshaken. You win when you remain yourself, when you stay rooted, when you can look back and say, "They tried to change me, but I remained whole." So next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, remind yourself, you weren't put here to become another version of their dysfunction. You weren't put here to trade your peace for poison. You were made to rise, not to become them. Let's pick up where we left off. You were not born to act out a role written by someone else. You're not here to keep the cycle going. You're here to disrupt it calmly, completely, and with clarity. You are the one who walks away without bitterness. You don't need to harden your heart to become untouchable. You don't need cruelty to prove your strength. And you certainly don't need to become darkness to defeat it. Let them spiral. Let them burn in the chaos they created. You rise quietly, firmly, without apology. Because the most devastating blow isn't your rage. It's the light you refuse to dim. You don't need to shout to show strength. You don't need to strike back to win. And you don't need to step into their chaos to overcome it. This isn't just modern emotional intelligence. This is Stoicism 101. The ancient Stoics didn't live in peaceful times. They lived among betrayal, politics, corruption, power, games sound familiar, but they didn't break. They didn't become bitter, and they didn't become what tried to break them. Instead, they mastered a rare art: indifference without apathy, strength without aggression, distance without hate. Take Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome. Surrounded by liars, manipulators, schemers every single day, and yet he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He didn't waste time plotting, didn't fight to prove himself. He focused on what he could control: his response, his character, his peace. To Marcus, toxic people weren't enemies. They were practiced down. Now, consider Epictetus, a former slave. He had even less power, but his wisdom, unshakable. He said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In other words, no one can destroy your peace unless you hand it to them. If someone insults you, it reveals their character, not yours. If someone betrays you, that's their failure, not your weight to carry. For Epictetus, freedom wasn't about escaping toxic people. It was about being so grounded inside yourself that no one could shake your soul. Now take Seneca, advisor to the unhinged Emperor Nero, a man with powerful enemies in every direction. And yet, Seneca said, "A wise man is indifferent to those who harm him." Why? Because he understood one core truth: your energy is limited, and giving it to the wrong people isn't just exhausting, it's spiritual self-harm. He believed that dignity isn't something you're given. It's something you uphold with restraint, with integrity, with choice. No one can humiliate you unless you agree to live by their labels. What does that look like today? You don't argue with people who want to misunderstand you. You don't prove your worth to someone who profits from denying it. You don't stay in rooms that constantly cost your peace. You leave, not with drama, not with bitterness, but with finality. You stop watering dead gardens. You stop offering gold to those who only value noise. You rise not to make a scene, but to set a standard. Because a modern Stoic doesn't fight to win. They walk away to reclaim their time, their energy, their dignity, their self-respect. To a Stoic, toxic people aren't obstacles. They are reminders to choose discipline over drama, reason over reaction, boundaries over battles. So, if you've been hurt, if you've been betrayed, if you've been used or discarded, stop, breathe, and ask, what would a Stoic do? Would they spiral? Would they beg? Would they lose themselves? No, they would stand, observe, and walk forward. Untouched, that is your power. You didn't walk away to change them. You walked away to make sure they never change you. Because toxic people aren't afraid of your anger. They're afraid of your absence. They're afraid of your peace. But most of all, they fear the version of you that no longer bends to their control. Fear doesn't come from being yelled at. It comes from realizing, I've lost control of you. When a manipulator senses that you're no longer emotionally available when your soul longer trembles under their pressure, when your silence doesn't mean confusion, but clarity, that's when real fear sets in. You never had to scream to be heard. You just had to stop answering when they called. Because this was never about noise. It was always about influence. And the moment you cut the emotional cord they once fed on, they were left with a truth they couldn't unsee. I'm locked out hand. There's no way back in. That's fear. Not fear of your hands, but fear of your healing. Not fear of your voice, but fear of your calm. Because now, They can no longer move you, and deep down, they know they never will again. Real power doesn't announce itself. A lion doesn't roar to prove he's a lion. He simply walks into the jungle, steps aside. True power is silent, grounded, unbothered. It doesn't chase. It doesn't justify. It simply is. And that kind of calm shakes insecure people, because it doesn't seek validation. It doesn't play the game. It doesn't need to win, it already has. Just by standing tall, and when you reach that state of peace, you'll start to see it. They flinch when you stay calm. They exaggerate when you don't react. They panic when you don't chase. They attack what they no longer understand, your stillness. But don't mistake it. That's not strength. On their part, that's fear, disguised as defiance. It's the panic of someone who realizes the old games no longer work on the new you. Let that truth sink deep. You don't need to be feared to be respected. But toxic people don't understand respect. They only understand control. So when you become unavailably, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they begin to fear you. Not because you're cruel, not because you're vengeful, but because you're free. And there's nothing more terrifying to a manipulator than a person who's no longer under their spell. That's the quiet strength of a stoic life. Not reacting, but responding. Not noise, but discipline. Not bitterness, but boundaries. You don't have to shout. You don't have to threaten. You don't have to chase. You simply cut off access. And when they finally realize that, disturbing your peace is no longer an option. They collapse, not because you destroyed them, but because you stopped letting them destroy you. Let them fear that. Let them sit with that. Let them feel what happens when their greatest weapon, your emotional response, has been permanently taken away. Because sometimes, the scariest thing someone can face is the truth. They have no power over a person who no longer needs anything from them. They thought you'd stay broken. They thought you'd chase. They thought you'd explain, react, beg. But you didn't. You chose silence over shouting, discipline over drama, peace over performance. And in doing so, you became something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. Untouchable. You didn't fight them. You outgrew them. You didn't mirror their darkness. You mastered your light. And now, they're afraid. Not because you attacked them, but because they can no longer manipulate you. They fear what they can no longer control. They fear the person you've become, calm, unshaken, untouchable. Because you didn't become them. You chose not to respond with the same toxicity. You chose freedom, so let them sit in the silence they once used as a weapon. Let them drown in the access they no longer have, and let your peace echo louder than any revenge ever could. Because when your power is quiet, when your presence is unshakable, when your soul is no longer up for negotiation, they feel it deeply. And that is enough. If this message hits you where it matters, if you're done letting toxic people rent space in your mind, and you're ready to walk in quiet strength and emotional clarities, subscribe now. Join us on the Stoic path where we don't chase closure, we become it. Drop a lock emoji in the comments if you're done giving them access, and share this with someone who's ready to take back their power in silence.